The smell of leather and wood smoke filled my lungs as I pressed my body against the cold stone floor, my cheek flat against ancient dust, my heart slamming so hard I was certain he could hear it. His boots were inches from my face, black leather worn soft at the edges, and I had never been so aware of how small I was, how easily crushed, how completely I had traded one trap for another. I had run for 3 hours through corridors I did not know, through a fortress I had never seen, driven by nothing but the sound of Varen's soldiers behind me and the memory of what he had done to his last wife. They said she had fallen from a tower. They said it was grief. But I had seen the bruises on her wrists at the funeral, the finger-shaped shadows that her sleeves could not quite hide. And I knew that falling had been the kindest option she could find. My father had sold me to that man for the price of his gambling debts. The soldiers burst through the door above me, their boots thundering against the flagstones, and I stopped breathing. I could see nothing but the underside of the heavy oak table and the legs of the chair where the Alpha King sat, utterly still, as if armed men storming his private dining hall was merely an inconvenience. "The girl," one of them demanded. "She came this way. Lord Varen wants her returned." A pause, the creak of leather as the king shifted in his chair. "There is no girl here." His voice was low, quiet, the kind of voice that did not need to raise itself to command absolute attention. "As you can see, she was spotted entering your halls, Your Majesty. If you would permit us to search, I would not." The silence that followed was suffocating. I pressed my hand over my mouth, terrified that my ragged breathing would betray me, and then I felt it. His hand. It found my hair in the darkness beneath the table, fingers threading through the tangled strands, and his grip tightened. Not painful. Warning. A command written in the pressure of his palm against my skull. Do not move. Do not breathe. Do not exist until I allow it. I obeyed. I had no choice. I was a rabbit in the shadow of a wolf, and the only thing keeping me alive was his inexplicable decision to lie. "Lord Varen's claim extends only to his own territory," the king continued, his voice unchanged, as if his hand was not fisted in my hair, as if I was not trembling beneath his table like a child. "This is mine. Whatever enters my halls belongs to me. You may tell him that." More silence. The soldiers did not argue. No one argued with the Alpha King, the man they called the Cruel One, the ruler who had united the northern territories through blood and fire and an absolute refusal to show mercy. I had heard stories of him since I was a child. He had executed his own brother for treason. He had burned villages that defied him. He was not a man. He was a force, a storm in human shape. And I had crawled beneath his table seeking shelter from one monster only to find another. The soldiers left. The door closed behind them with a sound like a death knell. And still, he did not release me. "You can come out now." His grip loosened. I did not move. That was not a request. I crawled out from beneath the table on shaking limbs, my dress torn and filthy, my hair a wild mess around my face, and I forced myself to stand, to look at him. If I was going to die, I would do it on my feet, not groveling on the floor like the broken thing Varen had wanted to make me. The Alpha King was younger than I had expected, early 30s perhaps, with black hair that fell past his jaw and eyes the color of winter ice, pale gray and utterly cold. He was handsome in the way that a blade is handsome, all sharp edges and dangerous elegance, and he was looking at me the way a hawk looks at a mouse it has not yet decided to kill. "You are either very brave or very stupid," he said, running from Varen into my territory. I did not know where I was running. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I only knew what I was running from. Something flickered in those pale eyes, interest perhaps, or amusement at my audacity. And what was that? A man who kills his wives and calls it tragedy. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. The fire crackled in the hearth behind him, casting shadows across his face, and I became suddenly aware of how alone we were, how completely I was at his mercy. "You are the Ashford girl," he said. "The one Lord Varen purchased for the price of your father's debts." Purchased. The word cut through me like a blade, but I did not flinch. "I am no one's purchase, not anymore." "No." His lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "Now you are in my hall, under my protection, which means you belong to me. That is how this works. That is the law of this territory." "I did not ask for your protection." "You crawled beneath my table and hid between my boots. I would call that asking." Heat flooded my cheeks, shame and fury tangled together in my chest, but I held his gaze. I would not look away. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me cower. "I will leave," I said. "I will go somewhere else, somewhere neither of you can find me, and you can tell Varen whatever you wish." "No." He rose from his chair, and I understood then why men feared him. It was not just his reputation, not just the stories of blood and fire. It was the way he moved, fluid and controlled, like a predator who had no need to hurry because he knew his prey could not escape. He crossed the distance between us in 3 steps and stopped close enough that I could smell him, leather and pine and something darker, something that made my pulse stutter in my throat. "You are not leaving," he said. "Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until I decide what to do with you. You cannot keep me here. I can do whatever I want." His hand came up, and I flinched, expecting a blow. But his fingers only brushed a strand of hair from my face. The touch so gentle it made my breath catch. "I am the king. This is my territory. And you, little rabbit, ran straight into my den." He gave me a room in the east tower, high above the rest of the fortress, with windows that looked out over snow-covered mountains and a lock on the door that only turned from the outside. The bed was draped in furs thicker than any I had ever touched, the fireplace already crackling with warmth, and fresh clothes had been laid across a wooden chest as if someone had known I was coming. A gilded cage, I thought, as I stood at the window watching the sun sink below the peaks, painting the snow in shades of amber and rose. A prettier prison than the one Varen would have given me, but a prison nonetheless. The first week, I tested every boundary. I tried the door at all hours, mapped the patterns of the guards who brought my meals, searched for hidden passages in the ancient stone walls. There were none. The Alpha King's fortress was exactly what it appeared to be: impenetrable, inescapable, a place where people went in and did not come out unless he permitted it. He visited me on the 3rd night. I was sitting by the fire, wrapped in one of the fur blankets from the bed, when the lock clicked and the door swung open. He entered without invitation, because of course he did, and stood looking at me with those pale wolf eyes that gave nothing away. "You have not eaten." I glanced at the untouched tray on the table. "I am not hungry. Starving yourself will not make me release you. It will only make you weak, and I have no use for weak things." "Then let me go. You will not have to concern yourself with my weakness or my strength." He moved closer, and I forced myself not to shrink back, not to show the fear that coiled in my belly every time he entered a room. He crouched in front of my chair, bringing his face level with mine, and I was struck again by how young he looked, how human, despite everything I knew he had done. "Why did you choose my hall?" he asked. "Of all the places you could have hidden, why there?" "I told you. I did not know where I was." "You are lying." His head tilted, studying me. "You ran for 3 hours through my fortress. You passed dozens of rooms, dozens of places you could have concealed yourself. But you kept running until you found me. Why?" I did not have an answer. I had asked myself the same question 100 times since that night, and the truth was that I did not know. Something had driven me forward, past all the other doors, past all the other shadows, until I found the one room with the one man who might be powerful enough to make Varen stop. Perhaps I was tired, I said. Perhaps your table was simply the first place I saw. Perhaps. He did not believe me. I could see it in the slight curve of his lips, the knowing glint in his eyes. Or perhaps some part of you understood that hiding from one wolf requires finding a bigger one. He left without another word, and I sat in the silence he left behind, my heart pounding, my thoughts tangled in knots I could not unravel. The days blurred together. I lost count of them after the second week, lost track of the passage of time in that high tower with its endless view of mountains and snow. The servants who brought my meals would not speak to me. The guards who stood outside my door looked through me as if I did not exist. The only person who acknowledged me at all was the king himself, and his visits grew more frequent as the days passed, longer, stranger, until I began to look forward to them despite myself. He brought me books on the third week, a stack of them, leather-bound and worn with age, stories of distant lands and ancient heroes that I devoured by firelight. "You can read," he observed, watching me turn the pages with hungry fingers. "My mother taught me. Before she died." How did she die? The question should have felt invasive, cruel, but there was something in his voice that made me answer honestly. Fever. When I was 12. My father never forgave me for surviving when she did not. He said nothing, but something shifted in his expression, some wall cracking just enough for me to glimpse the man behind the monster. He understood, I realized. He knew what it meant to be blamed for living. After that, he brought me more than books. He brought me news of the outside world, of Varen's fury, and my father's pathetic attempts to negotiate my return, of the political machinations that swirled around my disappearance like vultures around a corpse. He brought me meals and ate with me, sitting across the small table by the fire, and we talked for hours about everything and nothing, about philosophy and war and the price of power. "Why do they call you cruel?" I asked one night, when the fire had burned low and the wine had loosened my tongue. "Because I am." "You have not been cruel to me." His eyes met mine across the table, and for the first time, I saw something vulnerable in their depths, something raw and hungry that made my breath catch. "No," he agreed. "I have not. I do not know why. Perhaps I am not worth the effort. Perhaps." He rose, moving toward the door, and then stopped with his hand on the latch. "Or perhaps you are worth something else entirely. Something I have not yet named." The lock clicked behind him, and I sat alone with my racing heart and the terrible, wonderful realization that I no longer wanted to leave. It was Varen who forced the moment, in the end. He came with an army at his back, 200 men camped outside the fortress walls, demanding the return of his property. I watched from my tower window as the Alpha King rode out to meet him, flanked by his own warriors, and even from this distance I could see the tension in every line of his body. They talked for an hour. I could not hear the words, but I could read the gestures, the aggressive posturing of Varen's soldiers, the deadly stillness of the king's. When it was over, the king rode back inside the walls, and Varen's army remained where it was, a threat that would not dissolve. He came to my room that night, and he was different. The careful control was gone, replaced by something raw and dangerous, something that made the air between us crackle with electricity. "He wants you back," he said. "He is willing to go to war for you." "Then give me to him." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. "I am not worth a war." "You are wrong." He crossed the room in 3 strides, and then his hands were cupping my face, tilting it up to meet his gaze, and I could see the wolf in his eyes, the hunger he had kept leashed for all these weeks. "You are worth everything. You are worth burning the world, and I do not understand it. I have never understood it. But the moment you crawled beneath my table, I knew I would kill anyone who tried to take you from me. That is madness." "Yes." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, and I shivered at the gentleness of it. The contradiction of such softness from hands that had ended so many lives. It is. And I do not care. You do not know me. We have known each other barely a month. I know that you are brave enough to run from a monster and clever enough to find a bigger one. I know that you do not cower, even when you are afraid. I know that your mother taught you to read and your father sold you like cattle, and you survived it all with your spine intact. I know that every time you look at me, you see more than the stories, more than the blood, more than the crown. I know that I have never wanted anything the way I want you to stay. His forehead pressed against mine, and I could feel his breath warm on my lips, could feel the tremor in his hands where they held my face. Stay with me, he whispered. Not as a prisoner, not as a possession. Stay because you want to. Stay because this, whatever this is worth the war he will bring. Stay, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. I should have said no. I should have demanded my freedom, should have run again, should have done anything but what I did. But I was so tired of running. I was so tired of being sold and treated like a thing to be owned. And when I looked into his eyes, I did not see the cruel king the world feared. I saw a man as broken as I was, as desperate for something real. And I understood finally why I had run to his hall that night. I had been looking for someone strong enough to want me for more than my price. Yes, I said, I will stay. He kissed me then, slow and deep and desperate, and I felt the last of my walls crumble into dust. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me close. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be held by someone who wanted nothing from me but my presence. Nothing but me. We stayed like that for a long time, tangled together in the firelight. And I memorized the feel of his heartbeat against my chest, the warmth of his breath in my hair, the impossible gentleness of hands that had conquered kingdoms. Varen attacked at dawn. The battle was brutal and brief. I watched from my tower as the king's forces met the invaders at the gates, as steel clashed and men fell and the snow turned red with blood. I should have been afraid. I should have been praying for escape, for rescue, for anything but what I was actually feeling, which was a savage, terrible hope that the man I had chosen would be the one left standing. He was. I did not see him kill Varen, but I saw the aftermath. The enemy forces scattered, fleeing back across the border, leaving their dead behind. And then the king was striding across the courtyard, covered in blood and ash, and he was looking up at my window. And even from this distance, I could see the question in his eyes. I went to meet him. He was waiting in the great hall, still in his battle-stained armor, and he did not move as I approached. He only watched, those pale eyes tracking my every step, and I understood that this was the moment. This was where I proved that my choice was real, that I had meant it, that I was not a frightened girl who would flee at the first sight of what he truly was. I crossed the hall, and I took his face in my hands, blood and all, and I kissed him in front of his entire court. The murmurs that rippled through the crowd meant nothing. The stares, the whispers, the shock, none of it mattered. All that mattered was the way his arms came around me, the way he held me like I was something precious, something worth fighting for. You stayed, he said against my lips. I told you I would. You saw what I did out there, what I am capable of. I have always seen it. I pulled back to meet his eyes, and I let him see the truth in mine. I chose you anyway. His breath shuddered out of him, and for just a moment, the mask cracked completely. I saw the boy who had been taught that love was weakness, the man who had built walls so high he had forgotten what it felt like to let someone inside, the king who had conquered half the north but had never believed anyone could want him for himself. I do not deserve you, he said. Probably not. I smiled, and something in his expression softened, something that might have been hope. But I am not going anywhere. You will have to learn to live with that. I think I can manage. He kissed me again, softer this time, a promise rather than a claim, and I thought of the girl who had crawled beneath his table in terror just weeks ago. She seemed like a stranger now, a ghost of someone I used to be, before I learned that sometimes the safest place in the world is in the arms of a wolf. The winter passed, and spring came to the mountains, and I discovered what it meant to be the queen of a man everyone feared. It was not easy. The court did not trust me, the nobles whispered behind my back, and there were days when the weight of it all threatened to crush me. But every night, I returned to him, and every night he reminded me why I had stayed. "They will never accept me," I told him once, after a particularly vicious encounter with a duchess who had made it clear she thought I was nothing but a jumped-up refugee with ideas above my station. "They will learn." His arms tightened around me, and I felt the rumble of his voice against my back. "Or they will find themselves very far from court, very quickly. You cannot exile everyone who dislikes me. Watch me." I laughed despite myself, and he pressed a kiss to my shoulder, and I marveled at how far we had come. The cruel king and the runaway bride. The wolf and the rabbit who had somehow become his equal. My father sent a letter in the spring, begging forgiveness, promising that he had never meant for any of this to happen. I burned it without reading past the first line. Some wounds do not heal. Some betrayals cannot be forgiven. And I had built a new life now, a new family, with a man who had looked at me hiding beneath his table and seen something worth keeping. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked me one morning, as we stood on the battlements watching the sun rise over the mountains. "Running to me instead of somewhere safe?" I considered the question, turning it over in my mind like a stone worn smooth by water. I thought of the terror of that first night, the weeks of uncertainty, the moment I had chosen to stay. I thought of everything I had lost and everything I had gained. "There is nowhere safe," I said finally. "There is only here, and I would choose here every time." He took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine, and we stood together watching the dawn break over our kingdom. I had run from a forced wedding into the arms of the most dangerous man alive. I had hidden beneath his table like a frightened child, and I had found, in the shadow of the wolf, the only home I had ever truly wanted. Not because he saved me, because he saw me. And sometimes, that is enough.